Hello everyone, great to see you again. This is going to be the second part of the first lecture on the introduction to quantitative methods. And what I hope to achieve in this video is to emphasize important statistical definitions which will be key to the work that we do over the coming weeks, particularly as we develop towards inferential statistics in the second part of the course. These will be ever more important. So there's two main types of statistics which we're going to be covering in this class. So on the one hand, descriptive in the first few weeks, and then on the second hand, on the other hand, inferential statistics, which we'll be covering later. So what exactly do we mean by descriptive statistics? What's the definition? Well, essentially, this is a form of quantitatively summarizing the main dimensions of, in this case, spatial data, using a standard set of metrics. And most of you are all familiar with that standard set of metrics, for example, the arithmetic mean, the median, the minimum and maximum value, potentially what the interquartile range is, as well as the total range. Generally, there's a common usage of those metrics which I just mentioned in order to describe data. And it's usually presented, for example, in an academic paper within a table at the start of the analysis before maybe doing more complex quantitative analysis later on. And then on the other hand, the definition for inferential statistics is that this is a form of analysis which enables us to draw inference, so potential explanations about a population based on extrapolation. Often we use sampling techniques to do this, so maybe we can't survey the total population, maybe we just take a small number of entities that then we sample in order to gain a greater understanding. Obviously it's quite hard to find conclusive evidence that there is truth based on a hypothesis that you make, but you have often enough evidence within quantitative analysis to actually draw inferences and either accept or reject the statements which you made before you began the analysis. So what do we mean by a variable? And I'm sure most of you know this already. So this essentially is an attribute of an observation that can be measured, classified, or counted. And I've just put here x, y, or z as three potential variables. And often this is represented by a column, for example, within a spreadsheet. I noticed from the survey most of you know spreadsheets already. But within R, if you don't know R already, then think of a data frame, as I state here, as essentially the similar structure to a spreadsheet. And I just want to use some examples so that you really understand what I mean by this. So here we have, you can think of this as a spreadsheet or a data frame, but essentially it's a group of data. And let's think of the IDs as people. So we have person 1, person 2, person 3. And then, for example, we have X, which could be the weight of each individual. Y could be the eye color, and then Z could be the height of those individuals. So here, when I talk about the variable, I'm talking about this vertical column here, either X, Y, or Z. So what do we mean by a value? Well, that's a single item of numerical information. And I also just wanted to quickly point out that often we refer to data as singular or data. Actually, a singular value of data is actually called a datum. And this matters because if you go on to do further study, then this is the type of thing which your reviewer in your paper, once you've submitted it, might raise. So normally in the vernacular, when we're discussing data in popular contexts, for example, in the media or in the news, it doesn't matter really which way you refer to it. But in academic language, I'm afraid that it does, and you may be picked up by someone correcting you if you don't get this terminology right. So let's just go back to the spreadsheet, the data frame that I emphasized before. So you can see here that a single value could be essentially what's in each one of these cells. So here we have Z being the column, and I refer to Z1, Z2, Z3 as being the values which are in either this cell here, this second cell, or this third cell. And I hope that you're able to understand the algebraic naming convention there. So Z refers to the column, and then the 1 or the 2 or 3 is the indexing to the individual cell which we're referring to, so for the single value. So what's an observation? Well, here we define it basically as being a single entity which is being studied, usually as part of a larger group. But I want you to think of it in this case, given the example that I've given you, essentially as a row in a spreadsheet or in a data frame. So this is called tidy data. It's actually also called wide data because you have it's wide in the sense that you have a column for each one of the variables that you're interested in. So we'll get to that definition later. But essentially, just think of each one of these rows as a person, so an observation. So maybe you observed and you've taken information on each one of these individuals. So what's the definition of data? So it's any numerical or non-numerical information. And as I emphasized before, data are plural. So this is important when you write in academic terms. So here I'm referring to data as all of the information that we have within our spreadsheet or data frame. Well, what's the definition of a data set then? And really that's a group of data variables often presented in a tabular format. So we've spoken already about this essentially being a data frame that you can see here. But also I emphasize the fact that in mathematics you might also have this referred to as a matrix if it's fully quantitative. For example, engineers or physicists or mathematicians may refer to matrices, and it's just basically a two-dimensional table of data, as you see here, except obviously we've got some qualitative information. But anyway, I just want to make that key point. What do we define as a population? Well, this is the total number of entities that are possible to be studied. So, for example, if we say we want to carry out a study on the city of Fairfax, we have a boundary around the city of Fairfax, then all of the individuals that live within that boundary in the city of Fairfax, well, that would be the population, okay? And the important thing for me to emphasize is that, so capital N, as you see here on the right-hand side, is the standard way within statistics that we refer to the total population. So here we go. Here's a group of individuals that we're defining as the population. So what do we mean by a sample? Well, a sample essentially is a defined subset of the total number of entities within the population, and that's often referred to using n but lowercase. And this means that essentially that we have just a proportion of the total population. So this might be the number of individuals that you identify to actually carry out a survey, for example, or to interview. What do we mean by estimation? Well, if we don't have complete information, if we don't have all the data or understanding that we want, then we might need to estimate what particular values are. That's the process that we're referring to here. So, for example, if I pose you a question, how would you estimate the age of the population in a local area if you didn't undertake a full census and you didn't have the time or the money to do a full survey? So you could take a sample. We'll be doing a lot on sampling within this course, but then obviously it draws into question how representative the sample is that you're going to be potentially using to draw inferences from. And I just posed that question here, you know, which sample would you rather be using, sample 1 or sample 2? And importantly, they represent different proportions of the population, and this is going to affect the results that you obtain, and then how you try to generalize it to the rest of the population. And these are the types of statistical considerations which will be fairly central to this course as we move forward onto more advanced methods. Okay, fantastic. So that gave us a brief overview of some of the key definitions that will be being used within the course, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, which will be data visualization.